and welcome back to my channel, where I'm going to quickly explain the last optional class feature provided by Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, but this time for the Wizard class. As stated before, if you did not see the video where I explain what optional class features are, I highly recommend you go watch that before you watch the rest of this video, as it will cover the basics of what types of optional features there are and go over some of the terms that I will use in this video. To help you out, I have provided a link in the description below. The Wizard class gains only two new optional features, one which enhances your existing list of spells, while the other allows you to swap out cantrips. But, as I've also stated before, there is one point that needs to be made. These are optional class features, meaning that your character does not automatically get to acquire them, so it is best to talk to your Dungeon Master before you take any of these features. And that might come down to whether they're even allowing the new optional features to even be used. Some feel that they might be just a little bit too overpowered. Others might not necessarily feel that they're appropriate. And even then, other dungeon masters might be trying to make them as a reward of some kind for a quest that your character has to go through, or piece of lore that you might discover during a dungeon crawl or a search through a library. Things like that. It's all going to come down to what the dungeon master has planned. So let's get started and take a look at what the first new feature gives you. And it is available right away at level 1, and it is called Additional Wizard Spells. There are a grand total of 23 new spells that are available to your character, provided you're allowed to take them, and they will be available to you as your character levels up. In addition to the new cantrips, of which there are 5 of those, which seems to be a trend, the wizard gains 1 new first level, 3 new second level, 6 new third level, 4 new 4th level, 2 new 6th level, 1 new 7th level, and 1 new 9th level spell. As the wizard is really the only spellcaster that gains a spell book, this means that this class of character can literally learn every single wizard spell that is available or discoverable. However, there is still a limitation. They can only prepare new spells after completing a long rest, and they must remove previously prepared spells to make room for new spells in their preparation list. This does not mean you delete the spell, however, as it is literally stored in your character's spellbook, and because of that, your character does not really gain the means to add or remove new spells during a character's level increase. Now, the default rules provided by the player's handbook do give you the ability to add 2 new spells each time your character levels up. But you will also notice that they do not give you the ability to change out an existing spell that you have already learned. They actually state right here that you might find new spells as your adventures continue. Hence, how your character gains new spells. So what does this mean for you from a preparation standpoint? Well, let's say that at some point you discovered Tasha's Caustic Brew here, for example. So I'm going to throw that into level 1. Well, what happens is that Tasha's Caustic Brew gets added without the spell being prepared. That's the lack of the check mark here. Well, because of the limit that a spellcaster, or in this case a wizard, has when it comes to the number of prepared spells that they can carry around with them, if you will, you would have to choose one of these spells that you already have prepared and deselect it, making it unprepared. And then you can go ahead and make this new spell tagged as a prepared spell, if you will. Now it is available for you to cast. That's how you would go through swapping out your spells. But you'll notice I did not remove Mage Armor. I just made it unprepared. That's because you don't lose the ability to re-prepare that spell, or quote-unquote study that spell, the next time you take a long rest. Maybe you decide that Tasha's Caustic Brew isn't appropriate for the upcoming situation, but Mage Armor is. You can then just simply uncheck that and then recheck that. At level 3, your character will now gain access to the Cantrip Formulas feature. Before Tasha's Cauldron of Everything was introduced, the only spell type a wizard could not really change out was their cantrips. Once those were selected, they were more or less locked in stone. And the lore behind that is because, as a wizard, you more or less used cantrips to learn how to cast spells in the first place. And because of that process and how repetitive that process was, those cantrips, quote-unquote, were burned into your brain. So as a result, some DMs came up with ways to handle changing those out. But with Tasha's, there is now a defined way to do this, and it is handled via this feature. Like level 1 or higher spells, your character has learned how to now scribe cantrips into their spellbook. This gives them the means to swap out a prepared cantrip with another in their spellbook whenever they complete a long rest. This now gives the Dungeon Master a new means of providing you options as to where you can pick up new spells, specifically cantrips. It could be from someplace like an arcane library, a magic shop that happens to have one, or even something that is written on a wall, monument object, or a scrap of parchment. Your character would then spend the time required to scribe that new cantrip into their spell, thus making it available for you to be able to choose in the future. It also gives a nice convenient way for your character to be able to make use of these new cantrips. And once again, because of the way that a wizard makes use of cantrips, if you will, you would have to still remove the old cantrip from your actual spell table here, or spell list, and then drop a new one into place. Now, in the case of Fantasy Grounds, that's primarily done this way because of how the cantrips group works, if you will. You'll note that you don't prepare a cantrip. It's always flagged as prepared. It's always available. It's always meant to be available. So there's a bit of a different way that Fantasy Grounds handles that. But that brings me to the last thing that I want to go over, and that is around the default retraining capabilities that would be available for the wizard now that there's a defined process on how to swap out cantrips. And in this particular case, the only things that your character would not necessarily have covered for quote-unquote retraining capabilities are your skill abilities, or your proficiencies, I should say, and or your subclasses. You might decide to go with an entirely different wizard school, for example. Anytime you're going to look at making that kind of change, you're now going to fall under the default rules provided by Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, which I have already gone through and covered in the video where I explain what the optional features are. So I highly recommend you go and take a look at that particular video because I've already explained how that process works there. In conclusion, however, I do like the changes that have been made to the wizard, even though they are pretty much arcane in nature in that they are mostly new spells. The means to now be able to change out cantrips was something that was sorely missing for the class, as it did not make sense that they could not change out a simple cantrip, when they can simply swap out a level 9 spell, which is far more complicated, by completing a long rest. However, this does bring us to the end of this particular video. I want to thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. I wish to thank you for taking the time to watch this particular video. I hope you found it informative and useful to familiarizing yourself with Fantasy Grounds in general, and that you had fun in the process. If you found the video useful and you liked the content of the particular video, go ahead and click that like button to let me know. And if you have any questions specific to the topic covered by this particular video, or just have some comments in general, please feel free to post something in the comment section, and I will do my best to respond to any questions that are asked. Additionally, I do release content quite regularly, and it's generally specific to Fantasy Grounds or 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons at this time. So if you'd like to be notified when new videos come out, go ahead and subscribe and click the notification bell to ensure that notification is sent to you when I release a new video.